This wall divides Belfast into two parts. It might seem that bloody, long-standing conflicts dividing societies and cities in half do not belong in modern Europe, but rather happen in Africa or the Middle East. Yet, in Ireland, just a few hundred kilometers from London, considered one of the capitals and most important cities in Europe, a bloody conflict raged for several decades. It claimed the lives of thousands of people, destroying their homes and cities, and its effects remain deeply imprinted on society to this day.
And they ended up in the hospital. So they were just literally half a mile away. I was walking down the street. That's the second time I got blew up, by the way. But that was the worst one.
And there were bombs going off everywhere in the city centre, day in and day out.
I was walking down the street with three friends, and a no-warning bomb went off. September 1972. Next thing I knew, I was in the ambulance. I was in the hospital.
People died. It was bad. It was a war.
How did it come to this? That neighbors hated and killed each other? How did bombs come to detonate in shops, streets, and hotels, claiming the lives of innocent civilians? How did this brutal conflict leave its mark on Irish society? Was peace finally achieved? And are people truly satisfied with it? To discover the history of this conflict and talk with ordinary Irish people who experienced it firsthand, we traveled to Dublin, the capital of the independent Republic of Ireland, and to Belfast, which is part of the United Kingdom. The Troubles was a conflict over whether Northern Ireland should remain part of the United Kingdom, lasting for about 30 years. From the late 1998, it was fought between two groups that had opposing views surrounding this matter. Nationalists, most of whom were Catholics and wanted a united Ireland, and Unionists, who were mostly Protestant and wanted Northern Ireland to remain part of the United Kingdom.
I think people should look into it less as a religious conflict and more of one of colonization rather than necessarily. I think a lot of people think that it's because they are Protestant, because they're Catholic. It's not that.
Although the conflict was waged between two factions of opposing religions, it was not a religious war, like some people tend to call it. While it can be described as a sectarian conflict between different subgroups of the same religion, it arose mainly because the two sides had differing views on the allegiance of their country. Religion was used simply as a cultural label. To better understand the origins of the Troubles, we must go all the way back to the 1100s, when the British set their sights on colonizing Ireland. There they were met with fierce opposition, the strongest of which was in the northeastern part of Ireland called Ulster. The British decided they needed to anglicize the region. So in 1609, they began to confiscate land from native Irish residents and give it to loyal settlers.
They remembered that Ireland had been a nation long before the English invaded. A Celtic nation with a language of her own and a distinctive culture. They remembered how, in the 18th century, the Protestant English had tried unsuccessfully to crush the Irish Catholic faith.
You know, Britain is an oppressive force in Ireland. You know, they shouldn't have been here to begin with.
But it's here, at the Dublin GPO, that the talk became action on Easter Monday 1916. The flag of rebellion was raised and the First Republic proclaimed. The IRA was born in the battles that raged between British regulars and the Irish volunteers.
Although the Easter Rising was quickly suppressed, it started something that could no longer be stopped.
Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and of the dead generations from which she receives her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland, through us, summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom.
Sinn Féin fought the 1918 general election and swept Ireland, all except Ulster. The new Sinn Féin MPs didn't go to Westminster. Instead, they set up a parliament of their own, Dáil Éireann, which met in the Mansion House in Dublin. Half of the members were absent in English jails, but Ireland, at last, had a legislative assembly of her own.
In the 1918 elections, an Irish nationalist party pushing for independence, Sinn Féin, won 91% of the seats outside of Ulster. This signaled a widespread rejection of British rule across society, and also meant that Ulster was left as the only region of Ireland where Unionists in favour of British rule were in the majority. However, instead of taking their seats in Parliament, Sinn Féin formed their own revolutionary government and proclaimed a new Irish Republic. To enforce its authority against British rule, they also formed their own army. The newly formed military was christened the Irish Republican Army, the IRA when abbreviated. These events precipitated the Irish War of Independence. It ended with the 1921 Anglo-Irish Treaty that created a new country, the self-governing Irish Free State, which also included Ulster, but it kept Ireland a part of the UK. However, the treaty also included an opt-out clause for the northeastern counties, by which they could vote themselves out. And with the region's Unionist majority, Northern Ireland declared it would separate from the Irish Free State and rejoin the UK. The partition of Ireland sparked a huge divide in both Irish society as a whole and within the IRA itself. Between those that were pro-treaty and thought letting Northern Ireland go was a good middle ground, if it helped them take another step closer towards total independence from Britain, and those against it that wanted a united Ireland, independent from the UK. Because of this, there was a civil war immediately after the War for Independence. The IRA fought against the treaty, but the pro-treaty side supported by the British won, and Ireland remained partitioned. That left a region that was still home to a lot of Catholic Irish nationalists inside the UK, living alongside Protestant British Unionists, in a country they did not identify with.
What were later to be known as the Troubles had begun.
We began our journey across Ireland in Dublin, home to over 1.3 million people. It is the modern capital of the Republic of Ireland, a country independent of the UK and a member of the European Union. Dublin felt like a wealthy, modern European city where the results of the Republic of Ireland's dynamic development were clearly visible. But the effects of the conflict were not as visibly apparent there as they were in Belfast, which we visited later. The southern part of the island, meaning the Republic, is and was predominantly Catholic, so the people we interviewed were mostly followers of this faith.
I'm a Catholic.
The Catholic side.
Definitely identify with the Republic of Ireland, the Catholic.
Our second stop was Belfast, a city of 350,000 people in Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom.
Yes, in certain parts of Northern Ireland, not so much down here in the Republic of Ireland, but in the Northern Ireland, yes, there's big differences between the religions, between Catholic and Protestant.
Up north, like if you are in Belfast and if we had grown up in Belfast, like I have a friend who's grown up in Belfast, and his friend group would say there's not a day go by that you don't mention Protestantism and Catholicism, and it would definitely still very much form part of their identities up there.
Yeah, still peaceful. Everyone goes to different schools, Catholic schools, Protestant schools. There are mixed schools, but they're not actually mixed.
Yeah.
In Belfast, the divisions were clearly visible in the form of walls, the so-called peace lines, as well as murals and sites on both sides of the city, nationalist and loyalist. In both cities, we met many interesting people with diverse perspectives on an issue as complex and important to Ireland as the Troubles. But to better understand the divisions and emotions within Irish society, one must first become familiar with the course of the conflict and its causes. In the 1960s, Irish Catholics in Northern Ireland were widely discriminated against by the Protestant Unionists. They ran most large businesses and gave preference to Protestant employees or straight up refused to hire Catholics. The courts and police forces were mostly Protestant and treated Protestants more favorably.
And in Northern Ireland, there were many institutions where you could claim it was entrenched apartheid, where the Protestant loyalist ruling class kept the Catholic stamp, denied equal education opportunities, equal work opportunities.
And there was one time I was the only Catholic in the office, and then my bosses came over from England and discovered this, and they had it all changed around instead.
Despite the Civil War having ended years ago, the IRA had not disbanded, and against a backdrop of a growing civil rights movement, And there was recruiting again. But a tipping point in the conflict was the infamous Bloody Sunday. On the 30th of January 1972, 15,000 Catholic civil rights marchers defied a ban on public gatherings in Northern Ireland and came into violent conflict with British troops in the centre of Derry, the second largest city in Northern Ireland. Soldiers made arrests, used tear gas and rubber bullets, while protesters threw stones. And then British soldiers opened live fire on the marchers.
In Derry, and I went through Bloody Sunday, and I had a neighbour killed on Bloody Sunday.
Bloody Sunday, many, many years ago, when all the people were just shot dead like dogs in the streets. It was terrible. It was terrible.
"13 people died that day, with others injured. That was the moment when revolution took over. as many Irish nationalists decided that peaceful efforts were futile and no longer made sense, and the British state turned out to be an active aggressor. This was the point of no return, the start of the armed part of the conflict. One of the Republicans' most impactful campaigns were the 1981 hunger strikes, led by Bobby Sands and 9 other Republican prisoners. They fasted to death in an act of protest against the British government's revocation of their special political prisoner status. Their protest amassed incredible international coverage and helped radicalize a new generation of nationalists. The IRA's operations were also not limited to Ireland itself.
So, it spilled over. The conflict in the north north of Ireland was not confined to the north of Ireland.
One of the actions carried out by the paramilitary group was the Brighton Hotel bombing in 1984, the aim of which was to assassinate then British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and her cabinet while they were staying at the hotel during a Conservative Party conference. The IRA planted a long delay time bomb weeks prior to the detonation. The resulting explosion caused a central section of the hotel structure to collapse into the basement. 5 people were killed and over 30 were injured. Prime Minister Thatcher narrowly escaped unharmed. They also conducted several operations in mainland Europe. The era of the Troubles was tough on ordinary people who found themselves caught in the middle of a conflict that consumed their country for decades. Every person who remembers those times has some memories related to the violence on the streets of Irish cities.
They were bad. And it wasn't nice. It wasn't nice. Yeah.
I remember that the 2 children being killed in Warrington in the UK, and I also remember one of the bombings where the IRA bombed and killed about 16 people in a skillen. That was 1987. I was a teenager at the time, so that kind of stuck in my head.
The summer I was there, there was gunfire. They were shooting towards the Catholic. Loyalists were shooting towards the Loyalist paramilitaries, like the LVF, Loyalist Volunteer Force, were shooting towards the Catholic neighborhood, the homes.
Bloody Friday. It was a terrible bombing in Belfast. We were all murdered. It was awful thing. 1972, it was a terrible time.
If I walked up the left-hand side, everybody knew I was a Protestant. If I walked up the other side, then everybody knew I was a Catholic. And I had to get 2 buses to school when I was less than your age, 12 years old, otherwise you were beaten up. And I know what happened to me when I was young. I couldn't go to school, I get beat up, couldn't cross down the things and all like that. I got shot at too, but that's just not me, it's just where I lived.
Fear. That's my strongest memory, is fear.
Those times were traumatic for many. Everyone, in one way or another, experienced unimaginable tragedy and violence that affected thousands of civilians, people who simply found themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time, or who practiced a religion slightly different from someone living just a few blocks away. During our stay and exploration of Belfast, we came across many monuments and plaques dedicated to those who lost their lives in the conflict. You could practically feel the tragedy of these people, seeing plaques covered with the names of the deceased every few steps around the city. We also visited Shankill Road, the site of an IRA bombing. Despite military targets being intended, the bomb was placed in a shop and killed 10 people, including 2 children, while injuring another 57. Walking through places where daily life now goes on, yet marked by bloody reminders of the past, and speaking with ordinary people truly showed the scale and brutality of the conflict. In all the fighting, there were over 10,000 bombings and almost 37,000 shootings. More than 3,700 people were killed and almost 50,000 people were injured. Many of the victims and wounded were civilians. 54% of all people killed in the conflict and 68% of those who were injured were civilians. 35% of the 2,057 people killed by Republican paramilitaries were civilians, and 85% of the Unionist 1,027 victims were civilians. The British Army killed 188 civilians, and the RUC killed 28.
Good evening. A historic day at Stormont. After 2 years of talks and after a generation of bloodshed and decades of division and acrimony, George Mitchell ushers in what the whole island hopes will be a new era of peace. An agreement that unites Loyalist and Republican, Unionist and Nationalist leaders in a wide-ranging historical accord.
But after many years of those tragedies, it was finally time for peace. After nearly 2 years of talks, on the 10th of April 1998, the Good Friday Agreement was signed by both of the sides, finally putting an end to the violence. That acknowledged that the majority of the population in Northern Ireland wanted to remain part of the UK, but that a substantial part of it wanted a united Ireland. It was put to 2 referendums, one in the Republic and one in Northern Ireland. Both countries voted overwhelmingly in favor of the agreement. The paramilitaries agreed to give up a lot of their weapons, and 9 years later, in 2007, the British troops withdrew from Northern Ireland, ending Operation Banner. Everyone we spoke with agreed that the end of the conflict was positive.
Well, anything's better than what we were living in before. I'll say that.
Yes.
There's not much conflict anymore.
The ending, yes. The agreement in the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, yes, I'm happy with that.
Yes, because it's peaceful now. People aren't getting hurt.
Obviously, you would say with the Good Friday Agreement was positive and that brought mainly, broadly brought about peace, and that was good.
I think it is a vast improvement over what was the status quo, which was a low-level civil war with acts of terrorism creating general unease within the general population of Northern Ireland, as well as the South, as well as in Great Britain, being seen by, for example, the IRA as the occupiers.
Incidents of violence still occur, but compared to the brutality of those 30 years, they are minor.
When I was in university, so in, say, 2012 to 2016, where you think that the Troubles is completely over, a lot of my good friends in university were from up north, and sometimes when they were trying to come down, there'd be like a bomb scare on the bus and they'd have to get off the bus, even at that period of time, so after the Troubles. And for me, it was like a massive culture shock being from down south, saying that kind of a idea of that happening on my bus home is so foreign, and the fact that was just happening up the road is mental.
An interesting question is what effects the Troubles have on today's Irish society.
We still live, 95% of our people live in what we call single identity communities, i.e. you're Protestant or you're Catholic. 95% of social housing.
I know there's still pockets on both sides who like to keep things moving along, the old-fashioned way. But you have to progress, especially young people.
Because we've the problems with City Hall, we've the problems between the DUP and Sinn Féin in terms of government, so yeah, they're still there.
Yes, but not nearly as much as they were 20 years ago.
I mean, it's good that there's no more trouble, so it's good. War on the street. But there's still trouble that happens in Belfast every day without political differences.
Well, where Belfast is concerned, there's still a lot of divide. So Catholic communities and Protestant communities are still, for the most part, separate. They have peace walls and stuff that divide the communities. So there is still divide, but we do get along a lot better than what we used to.
They want to remain staunch Catholics or staunch Protestants. There's no give at all, which is the pity.
Yes, I would agree with that. I know a friend who got beaten up because he went to Ireland. He went to Northern Ireland when he was wearing an Irish jersey, an Irish football jersey, and he got attacked.
Unfortunately, I think they are. We're still well within living memory of what went down, during the Troubles, who went down, who was killed, who was injured, families, friends, relations still remember the losses, feel the losses deeply. The hatred was deeply ingrained. And even though peace is there, and we're seeing very little sectarian violence in the past, over 2 decades now. So that is a good sign that people, whether or not they still feel anger and great difference between themselves and the other side, they're not acting on it. There is a much greater degree of calm, and with that, peace. Peace in the minds of individuals, as well as the general zeitgeist, the general feeling that people have as they go about their lives in Northern Ireland and interact. And always, even during the Troubles, there was so much interaction between, the Protestants, the Loyalists, and the Catholics, the Nationalists. They worked together. They often attended some schools together, though there was a sectarian divide. But there was a lot of working together, going out to get shopping together. The whole rave scene, club scene, ecstasy scene back in the late 90s, early 2000s brought, Catholic and Protestant, Loyalist and Nationalist together to party, to dance together, to play together.
I'm Catholic. He is a Protestant. So we would have been, I guess, on those sides. Were we up there?
Yeah, but we're not.
We're not.
Many people outside of Northern Ireland think that the Good Friday Agreement had solved the issue entirely. What it really did, though, was secure peace for now and leave the question of Northern Ireland's place in the UK open-ended. It stated that Northern Ireland would remain part of the UK until a majority of people in both Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland wanted unification. If unification ever does have majority support, it says there should be a referendum. There wasn't the United Ireland that Republicans wanted, nor was it a guarantee that Northern Ireland would be part of the UK forever. But most of the people were okay with this middle ground, if it meant the violence would stop. Today, tension between both of the sides is most visible in Northern Ireland's segregated neighborhoods, separated by peace walls. Some of them reach up to 8 meters in height. All peace walls were targeted to be removed by 2023, but that target was missed. Minor violence also still occasionally springs up between the two sides. Some splinter groups of the paramilitaries are still armed, but most of the people involved in the conflict have fully committed to the peace process. The most important takeaway from this documentary is what we can learn about religious conflicts, but also about conflicts in general. What drives a situation to the point where neighbor wants to kill neighbor? This is a human condition across the entire globe, and the case of Northern Ireland, close to us due to its geographical location in Europe, shows that dialogue is possible. It proves that despite differing views, people who have experienced bloodshed firsthand prefer this kind of peace over more decades of war.
But I actually think that people from the Republic of Ireland, or like what's called the Republic of Ireland, need to learn a little bit more about the Troubles. Because for us, I think we have this romantic idea of a united Ireland. And I think if you asked a lot of people from the South what they actually think that means or what they're uniting with, they wouldn't be able to give you a proper answer, and they don't know our own history enough.
Learn from our mistakes. A lot of people died for a long time before they got around a table and talked.
A lot of people died over fucking nothing, you know what I mean? So it's like religion, man.
Talk things out diplomatically.
Talk together.
future, yeah.